Hey everyone, and welcome to the Persistent Hub live event to celebrate the launch and show you a little bit about what you actually get as part of the Persistence Hub. I hope all of you are doing great and having a good week so far. So here on my left on the second screen, I have the chat open. So if you want to ask any questions, if you want to interact in any way, feel free to post your questions there. I see there are quite a few people already active. Yeah, hello to everyone. I see we have people from New Zealand, we have someone from India, South Africa. It's looking great. Yeah, so in today's stream, I want to show you a little bit more about the Persistence Hub and explain why I actually decided to do that. And well, some part of the answer is because you guys asked me to, and because I thought it's a great idea and probably the better option than just offering standalone courses than before, because in such a membership, there are way more ways that I can support you building better persistence layers and learning more about Java persistence technologies. But more about that in a bit. So let's open up the screen share and show you the Persistence Hub landing page. You might have already seen it. If not, you can find it at persistencehub.com, or you just go to torbenjanssen.com and click the link in the header. So what do you get within the Persistence Hub, and why do I think that this is the right approach in this time to actually learn about Java persistence and other Java topics? The reason for that, why I think it's a better option, is quite simple. It's more interactive. We can have more interactions with each other. I can help you closer than it's usually the case within an online course. We can do regular live events like Q&A streams, like short expert sessions where guests and I talk about things that might not be the best fit for an entire course that is expected to be several hours long and go in depth into a huge topic. Quite often there are things that are important, that are timely relevant, and they're just not that big of a deal. I mean, that could be the newest Hibernate release. All of us want to know what's in there, and it can probably be explained in, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 minutes. So definitely not in an entire course, right? At least as long as we are not talking about the new release of Hibernate 6. But that's something I will talk about a little bit more a little later in this stream. Yeah, so with the Persistence Hub, you get a more interactive experience than with the online courses that you probably know from the past, which doesn't mean that the online courses are no longer part of it. I still think, and that was also the feedback that I got from you, that the online courses are a great way to teach a new topic, to dive in depth into certain things, to explain complex mappings, query capabilities, patterns, all these kind of things. And that's why I included all the courses in the Persistence Hub course library. And the huge advantage here is, with being a member of the Persistence Hub, you get access to all courses, which means the JPA for Beginners course, the Advanced course, the Hibernate Performance Tuning course, the Spring Data JPA course, and the Data and Communication Patterns for Microservices course. So if you have any questions about something that's related to Hibernate JPA or Spring Data JPA, there will be most likely an answer somewhere in one of these courses. And by having access to all of them, you have all the information you need at your fingertips. And to make it even a little bit better, there's a community forum. And if you have a question, you can post it there. And myself, or maybe someone else, can provide some useful insights and maybe point you to the right lecture in the course to help you find the information that you need. And Then we, of course, have live Q&A streams that will be the membership-only version of the Coffee with Torben live streams that we had in the past, where we entirely focus on helping you with your current questions and helping you to solve the next big problem in your project, or maybe to set yourself up for the next interview, or to do whatever helps, honestly. And then we have one thing that I'm really looking forward to, because a lot of you guys asked for that, and that are coding challenges. The idea here is I prepare a small task and you guys try to implement it. I will post the first one of that on next Monday, where we then work on a small mapping task. I don't want to say more than that right now, but I prepared something where you have a relatively simple table model and an interesting object map or class mapping that I see in quite a lot of projects. And I'm interested to see how you solve it and what you think about that. Let me take a quick look at the chat. Yeah, hello everyone. A few more joined in the chat, and yeah, I also see a question there. I will get to the questions in a bit. Just give me a few more minutes. I want to give you a quick rundown of what you get in the Persistence Hub, and then we do an open Q&A part. So yeah, here you can see the Persistence Hub main page. That is within the membership. So you need to be a Persistence Hub member to get here. And there you see at the top the discussion of the week, where we will talk about a different topic each week. In this case, it's the question of how you check for performance problems during development. Because in my experience, that is the main differentiator between projects that struggle from performance problems and from projects that work perfectly fine. So here I asked you, what is the approach that you're currently taking? And there you can see a link to the forum. And I will not go there because then you will see my answer to that. And I want to keep that as a small benefit for everyone who's part of the Persistence Hub membership. But if you go there, you will find my answer to that question, what I suggest other projects or teams should do to avoid these problems, links to more resources, and answers from every one of you who wants to participate in that discussion. And there we will see a lot of different approaches, most likely, on how you can handle these things, and can discuss the benefits and downsides of each of them. And we do that every week on a different topic. See a question in the chat about the coding challenge that I just mentioned. And that question is, am I going to provide the answers to the coding challenge? Yes, of course I will. In multiple ways. So in the coding challenge, you will have a few hints. So there's there's an element on the coding challenge page that's hidden in the beginning that you can open up. And in that, you will find a few hints to blog posts, maybe Java doc documentation, a lecture in the course that points you in the right direction, so that you have something you can work with if you're not sure how to handle it. And then I will present the solution in a video call. So on the 6th of September, which is about a week after I posted the coding challenge, we will have a live Zoom call in which I present the solution and answer all kinds of questions. And this call will, of course, be recorded and part of the coding challenges library later on. And as you can see here, that's just one of the upcoming live events planned for December. So we'll do a live welcome event on Monday for everyone who's already part of the Persistence Hub. And in that welcome event, I will talk a little bit about the Persistence Hub itself, of course. I will get into more details on Hibernate 6, what's the current status of the project, into which problems I ran, and I'm still running while working on the update of the Hibernate performance tuning course for Hibernate 6. And yeah, what do I expect there with Hibernate 6? Then we have the discussion of the coding challenge and the Q&A call on the 6th of December. A week later, I will do an expert session where we'll talk about optimizing the performance of Spring Data JPA-based persistence layers, which, that shouldn't be a surprise, is relatively similar to the performance tuning things you can do for a Hibernate-based persistence layer. Because, well, in the end, Spring Data JPA is just using Hibernate for a huge part of the functionality it provides. But there are a few things that are Spring Data JPA specific, and that will be the parts that I will be showing in this expert session, which will be about an hour long, depends a little bit on how long we do the Q&A part and stuff. But I will do a presentation there for about probably 40-45 minutes, and then lots of Q&A. And then there's another Q&A call planned for the 20th of December. And if you go to one of these events, you can see that there's a Zoom link in the event, and that there's also a forum post for that. So you can post your questions before the event in the forum. I will answer them. I will also answer questions live on the call, of course. But if you are not able to join, then post them in the forum, and then I will upload a recording afterwards, and you can watch the recording later. What else do we have? We have courses, a bunch of them. So here you can see all the courses that we currently have. This library will be growing over time. Right now I'm working on the performance tuning course, and I'm updating it to Hibernate 6, which isn't released yet, which hopefully gets released in December. But based on the custom builds that I'm currently using, I expect that beta 2 will actually be quite good, and probably even good enough to complete the course entirely. So you can expect here that in the next 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks, you probably see a final version of the Hibernate performance tuning course. And if we go, for example, here to the first lecture, you can see here the lecture page. You have, in this case, a 6.5-minute video here in which I talk about the typical causes of performance problems, and then a written version of the lecture. And if it's a lecture with code snippets and IDE parts that I'm showing in the video, you of course find the code snippets down here as well. So you can decide if you want to watch or read the video. And based on how I am using such material, I'm usually going into the video first, watching it entirely, and then when I need to go back and figure out certain things that I might have missed or that I now want to apply to my project, I usually use the written version, but that is of course totally up to you. And then I see another question in the chat. So I wrote, I've already purchased 2 of your courses before New Hub. Do I still have access to those courses if I cancel my subscription? Yes, of course. Nothing will change with your courses. When you bought the courses, I promised you lifelong access to these courses, and I'm intending to keep my promise. Whether or not you sign up for the Persistence Hub membership, you keep access to your courses. Nothing changes there if you don't want to. If you join the Persistence Hub, you will still have access to the old courses, but there will be the same or newer versions of these courses in the Persistence Hub subscriptions. So I guess while you're part of the Persistence Hub, you will probably not use your courses. But if you decide to cancel your subscription of the Persistence Hub, which I hope doesn't happen too soon, then you can still watch your old courses that you bought before you joined the Persistence Hub. The only thing you're then losing is everything that was part of that membership. But that should be self-explanatory. So yeah, nothing changes for anyone who bought the courses. And if you bought the courses, then you should have gotten an email from me this morning with a special offer for existing course owners. I want to reward your loyalty, and I'm making you a special offer that's even a little bit better than the one you see on the website, because, well, you already have some of the courses that are part of the subscription, right? So if you bought courses and you didn't get an email this morning from me, then please send me an email, reach out to me, and I will make sure that you get the right link. Yeah, then I got another question about parity purchasing at checkout. No, for the membership, there will be no parity purchasing discount as it was in the past, and that is because the actual price of the monthly price of the membership is much lower than it was for the courses. So I'm already making you a great offer here to get access to all the courses. And if you say, okay, that's more than, well, a year of the Persistence Hub is more than you can afford, then maybe opt for the monthly option and join it for a few months, work on the stuff that you need. Maybe make sure to work on the stuff that you can also use in your next interviews or when you're talking to your manager the next time, and then do either cancel the subscription and come back later, or switch to the annual version, whatever happens to fit your budget and schedule. George asked, did you do a presentation of the existing courses? A short one. I showed this part here where you can see which courses are currently part of the Persistence Hub membership. We have the JPA for Beginners course, the Advanced Hibernate Online Training, the Data and Communication Patterns for Microservices course, the Spring Data JPA course, and the early access to the updated version of the Hibernate Performance Tuning course. That one will be completed within this year. And the main reason why it's not completed yet is because it's based on Hibernate 6. And Hibernate 6 is currently in beta 1. And I have different builds from different branches on my hard drive right now, where I got different bug fixes from the Hibernate team with which I would say everything that I use in the course is working, just not on the same branch. So I'm hoping that with beta 2, we get to the point where we can actually use an official release for the course examples. You can already download the course examples, the code snippets and everything from the course, but where we then have an official version that that is actually working. So yeah, here you can see the example of an actual lecture. Then we have, let's go back to the index page of the Persistence Hub. So here I showed you that we have multiple live events coming up on the Persistence Hub, and you will find recordings here in the expert sessions section. Right now there's only the session planned for December 13th, where I talk about Spring Data JPA performance tuning, It will then go to the archive as soon as we are done, so you don't have to join live. I mean, I recommend you do it because then we can discuss and I will answer your questions live. But you can also join it or watch the recording later on if you're not able to join due to time zone or time constraints. Same is the case for Q&A calls. I linked a few copy with Torben live chats down here because they're pretty close to what we will be doing in the Q&A streams, and then you can see here the planned Q&A streams as well. And then we of course have the forums where I hope you will introduce yourself. We can talk about all the things that are going on in your projects. We have of course news and announcements, forums about the different content formats you have as part of the membership. And if you look at the Q&A and expert sessions section, you can see here that we have a thread for each and every live stream. And there you can add your questions whenever you want. And yeah, then we also have something for coding challenges, where we will start discussing the actual coding challenge at the beginning of next week after I posted the first coding challenge. And a little bit for support and feedback and water cooler, the typical stuff you find in each and every community. So the most fun will probably be in the water cooler, where we talk about all things that are not directly code related. And yeah, but I'm sure you will find your way around here in the forum. And if not, then just reach out to me. Okay, that was the quick overview of the Persistence Hub. If you want to join, go to persistencehub.com or torbenjansen.com, join Persistence Hub. I post the link into the chat as well. So I hope to see you inside. And now I would say we do a little bit of Q&A, and then I show a little bit of what you need to do to migrate your existing Hibernate 5.something based application to Hibernate 6. It isn't that much you need to do. There are a few things that are necessary, but it's done rather quickly. If you don't run into any issues, which you shouldn't in Hibernate version 6.0.0 final, then it should be a quick thing. I think it took me 15-20 minutes probably to migrate the example project of the Hibernate performance tuning course, at least on a code base, so that it compiled and deployed. Later on, I then of course ran into a few issues, but that's to be expected if you start working on an alpha version and then right now on a beta one. And based for beta one, the current Hibernate version is great. Don't get me wrong there. I'm pretty optimistic that the team can achieve their goal to release Hibernate 6 within this year. Yeah, there's a question in the chat about reactive programming. I find it very interesting via Spring Web Flux. I totally agree on that. That's very interesting. Are you planning to do a course on reactive Hibernate? Yes, most likely. Depends a little bit on you, or basically on everyone in the Persistence Hub membership. So what we will do is we will work on the Hibernate performance tuning course for now. So my team and I are working on it right now. You will see that when you are part of the Persistence Hub and look at the Hibernate performance tuning course, because we are releasing every lecture into the membership as soon as it's done. There are just a few things that are not done yet, because we are either still editing the video or the code samples don't work as they should. But I'm very optimistic that we will finish that in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And after that, I will update the advanced Hibernate course. That will be the topic for the first quarter. And we will update that one to Hibernate 6 as well. Oh, by the way, when I'm when I say that I'm updating the course to Hibernate 6, then you can, of course, still use it with older Hibernate versions. Right now in the performance tuning course, for example, I'm making sure to point out what works in Hibernate 4, what works in Hibernate 6, and what works in Hibernate 5. So what works in all three versions, 4, 5, and 6. And there are things that work in all three of them. There are things that need to be configured slightly different, and there are things that are totally new in Hibernate 5 or 6. And I point that out and show you what you can do in the different versions. And the same will be true for the Advanced Hibernate course. I don't expect to do an entire new version of the JPA for Beginners course anytime soon. There will just be a small update for the JPA 3 changes, but JPA 3 didn't bring any new features. It's just package names and configuration parameter names. So we will not do an entire new course on that. But as soon as we start working on the Advanced Hibernate course, or made some progress on that, I will ask all the members in the Persistence Hub what's the next topic you want to learn about. That could be Hibernate Reactive. That could be something like Spring Data JDBC. That could be a more in-depth course on version-based database migration with Flyway and Liquibase, for example. That could be something completely different. Maybe something that's not directly connected to the persistence layer, but a little bit more about the backend programming. So we don't have anything on that yet, but maybe we do something on basic Spring functionality in the future. But all of that is something for the future, and I can't promise anything there yet. Let me finish the update of the performance tuning and the advanced course, and then we do a survey in the forum, and we see what is the most urgent thing for the most people, and then I see what I can do about that. Oh, great. And I just wrote that he's in and that he really likes the idea of the Persistence Hub. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to see you in the Persistence Hub, and maybe we see each other on Monday on the Welcome event. If you join the Welcome event, make sure to have a webcam and microphone if you feel comfortable with that. Because it will be a Zoom call, and I want to make these things as interactive as possible. Because that is one of the main motivations for me to have a membership, to be able to interact closely and directly with each of you, which makes it way more enjoyable for all of us and way more efficient to show you new things and to answer your questions. So in the best case, you join live via video and audio, and we just talk about these things that I can help you with. And but if you're not comfortable with that, you of course still have the option to write something in the chat or post it in the forum in advance. Okay, any more questions? Let me scroll up in chat real quick. Do we have something here? Did I miss something? Oh yeah, there was one question. On LinkedIn, I'm pretty sure I will horribly mispronounce your name. Maybe Zigai? I don't know. If you're still here, I hope you know that that I tried and that I meant you. So yeah, I'm doing great, thanks. And you asked, what do you think about GraalVM? I think GraalVM is great. It's a very interesting approach, especially with Quarkus, which enables us to use the Jakarta EE stack on top of GraalVM, including Hibernate. And I think it's an amazing solution for all use cases where you need very short startup times and very low memory footprint. So if you're running in a cloud environment, that might be interesting. But if you're working on an in-house application that's deployed on premise, then it's probably not the most relevant thing, because there it doesn't really matter if the whole thing starts up in half a second or in 5 seconds, because you're usually not starting and stopping it. It's up and running for weeks, months, or longer. So yeah, what do I want to say here? The main point here that I want to make is it's a great tool for the right problem. And that means you have to be in the situation where you need low memory footprint and short startup times. Otherwise, it just complicates your technology stack. So as with every tool, I recommend take a close look at your requirements, take a close look at what the tools and frameworks and so on are capable of. And if you think that all of that matches for GraalVM with your specific application, then yeah, go for it. It looks very interesting. I played around with it a little bit, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I like it even better if we put Quarkus on top, because Quarkus gives us a lot of great tooling for the Java EE space. Panache, which is part of Quarkus and which is basically a framework based on Hibernate, brings us a lot of things we love in the Spring Data JPA world and provide that as a Jakarta EE based solution. So yeah, that's great. You also find a few articles about Quarkus on, especially on Panache, on my blog. So if you're interested in that, feel free to take a look. Okay. I think that were the questions for now, right? Yeah, so if you have any more questions, then feel free to join. And what I want to do now is I want to quickly show you what you need to do to migrate your application to Hibernate 6. Dan asked in the chat if I have any future plans to touch on things like persistence in Neo4j or other NoSQL databases. There my answer is the same as for the do I want to talk about Hibernate Reactive. In general, yes, but that depends on the amount of interest in the Persistence Hub membership. So if there are a lot of people who are interested in these technologies, then I will definitely go into more details on that. But what, for example, could be an option is that we do an expert session on Neo4j, where either I try to show you a little bit about Neo4j, or I can maybe find someone else who is a real expert with Neo4j and can show something there as well in about an hour with a little bit of Q&A and presentation and so on. So yeah, in general, Neo4j is an option for the future. I worked in a few projects where we used it for very specific use cases. Yeah, another would be full text search, for example, which is something I also talked about on the blog a little bit, and where we could dive a little bit deeper. So yeah, there are a bunch of data-related topics that sooner or later will become part of the Persistence Hub in one form or the other. That is one of the main ideas there, that we are growing the content constantly in the Persistence Hub membership, and that you get access to everything, and that you then pick and choose whatever fits your current needs in the project. And if you just have an hour to spare to learn about something new, then you maybe take a look at the latest expert session, where we are not that strictly focused on on course-like content. It's more about getting an introduction to specific topics or talking about something that can be explained in 30 to 60 minutes. Then a question about what are the new major features in Hibernate 6. There are a lot of internal changes in Hibernate 6, and that is the most important part for now, because that is something that enables the Hibernate team, that's at least my hope, to work on new features in the future and to improve a lot of things. So what do we have here with Hibernate 6? What the team does is they fixed an issue they have with Hibernate 4 and 5, and that is that the query generation is distributed over a huge part of the code. And that makes it really hard to optimize things, to implement new features there. And what they now did was they have the Java code that we work with APIs and stuff, and then they introduced a semantic model on which the code now works, and then they have one place where they transform the semantic model into an abstract syntax tree, which then becomes an SQL statement, and that makes it much easier to add new features to the query creation and stuff like that. So what I, for example, saw when I worked on the performance tuning course was that working with database functions now got much easier because Hibernate just took the function call from the JPQA statement, and even though it didn't know that function, it just put it into the SQA statement and executed it and got back the result and handed it in the same way as it handles all explicitly supported functions in Hibernate 4 and 5. So that is a great change. And then we will hopefully see a few more improvements and new features there. Another thing that changed is the what did I want to say? Another thing that changed are the dependency on the JPA specification. So they upgraded that to JPA 3. I will show you what that means in a few seconds. Then we will get a new support for types, a new handling of types in the near future. That's, as far as I know, still under development. There are discussed changes and extensions for the criteria API that we will hopefully get in the future. I don't expect them to be part of Hibernate 6.0.0 final, but I'm not part of the Hibernate team, so maybe they have something prepared there. I just don't expect it right now. So yeah, there are a few changes coming, but in Hibernate 6.0.0, I don't expect too many dramatic new features that will get us incredibly excited. It will be, at least that's the experience that I got now in the performance tuning course. It will just be a little bit better than Hibernate 5 for us. Internally, they did a lot of changes that then hopefully get us new features in the near future. Okay, so what do we need to do to migrate an application to Hibernate 6? Well, increase the version number, sure. And then change the group ID of the main dependencies. So the old one was org hibernate. The new one is org hibernate ORM. And then it just has the typical core, JPA, model-GAN, JCache, and so on, as you know it from the from Hibernate 5. You see here that I included for Hibernate 5 the Jakarta packages. And that's no longer necessary for Hibernate 6 because their Hibernate core is based on JPA 3. What does that mean? And that means that you need to change all your imports from JavaX persistence, entity manager, entity, and so on, to Jakarta persistence. Don't go crazy about it. That's totally harmless. A search and replace over your project does the job. It's totally fine. You might have already done that for Hibernate 5 if you used the Hibernate Core Jakarta modules. If not, it's just a search and replace, either on the command line or in the IDE, depending on how complex your project is and how many modules it's split up and so on. This is a task of 1 to 30 minutes probably. That's really a harmless task. Another thing you need to do is you need to change your configuration parameters. If you use any of the JavaX persistence or Jakarta persistence properties, you can see it here. Hibernate 5 still, Hibernate 6 still supports both parameter names, at least in the current version. And then, but I recommend that you switch from JavaX to Jakarta persistence as soon as you switch to Hibernate 6 and update your package names anyways. I asked, does Spring Boot JPA also use Hibernate 6? If so, do I need to do what you are doing here? No, it doesn't use it yet. But there is, if I remember correctly, then there is a new major version for Spring planned for the second half of next year, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised if that one supports Hibernate 6, but that is something that the Spring Data JPA team would need to answer. If you're switching there, then yes, you need to do a few things. You at least need to change your package names, because you have to do it for at least for your entity classes, because all the mapping annotations are part of the Jakarta persistence package now and no longer JavaX persistence. But as I said, that is a search and replace operation, nothing more. And that is it for most projects. Some might need to adjust the some of the log categories. As I said, the Hibernate team redesigned the entire query creation part. So there are a few minor changes to log categories. You might need to adjust your configuration there and switch it to org Hibernate ORM JDBC bind if you want to see the bind parameters. That is actually an interesting change. With Hibernate 6, we finally have an easy way to just see bind parameter values. With Hibernate 4 and 5, we can see all bind parameters and all extracted parameters by setting the right log category to trace. In most cases, we just want the bind parameters, because logging such a line for each extracted parameter from the result set just creates a lot of noise, because then you see here a few hundred lines of extracted parameter messages, and nobody wants to see that. With Hibernate 6, you can set org Hibernate ORM JDBC bind to trace, and you just see bind parameters and no extracted parameters. Just a small change, but very nice for development configurations. There are two other things you will need to do. If you are still using the old criteria API, then you will need to migrate to JPA's criteria API. So what means old criteria API in this case? In the past, Hibernate had its own criteria API, and that one got replaced by JPA's criteria API quite a while ago, and it's been deprecated for ages. And the Hibernate team now decided to not update the old API when reworking the query creation, which is understandable, and removed it entirely, which from my point of view is totally fine after having it removed, deprecated for several years. The second thing you need to do is to take a look at your result transformers if you're using some. So with Hibernate 5, we had these result transformer interfaces, and that's a deprecated interface that has the transform tuple and transform list method, and both had to be implemented. And these were deprecated for Hibernate 5, and quite a lot of developers thought, okay, now they're removing result transformers. No, that's totally wrong. They are keeping result transformers. They are just cleaning up a design flaw that they had in the previous versions, because the result transformer interface requires the implementation of the transform tuple and the transform list method. But I would guess about 90% of the result transformer interfaces, implementations, only implemented one of these methods in a meaningful way, like I do here. In the transform tuple method, I instantiate a new book publisher value object and return it. My transform list method just returns the list it got called with. That's pretty useless. But based on the interface definition, we have to provide that, we have to implement that method as well. With Hibernate 6, you can do this up here. You now have a tuple transform interface and a list transformer interface, if I remember correctly. So you now have two interfaces instead of the one result transformer interface, and each method got moved to one of these interfaces. So the tuple transformer interface now defines one method called transform tuple, which is the one we implemented here. That's the same method. So we can now do something like this. Doesn't look very different to the implementation with Hibernate 5, right? Right. We can also do this, because now our tuple transformer interface is a functional interface. It defines only one method, and we can handle our result transformation in this way, which is way more, way shorter than the old approach. Both work totally fine. Use whatever you like better, but this is, I think, the more concise way of presenting it compared to the approach up here. And yeah, that are the two main things you need to do to your code base to transform it to Hibernate 6. In addition to updating the Maven dependencies and updating your package declarations. Everything else works out of the box, or will hopefully work out of the box with Hibernate 6 final, which we will hopefully get soon. As I said, Hibernate 6 Beta 2 will probably look very, very good. Beta 1 is already solid, and I would expect that a lot of projects could use it. Only for testing, please. It's a beta version, don't deploy it to production. But I would expect that a lot of projects will already work with that. I'm not using it in any customer project yet. We will there wait for at least the final release and then do some tests, and then it will depend on how complex the application is, what our release cycles is, how good we have the whole deployment process automated, and so on. Maybe we will deploy 6.0.0 final to production. Maybe we wait for 6.0.1 and see how many bug fixes we get there. Let's wait and see. Right now, I'm quite optimistic about the Beta 2 release, as I said. Yeah, I would start using that in some of the projects that have a rather long release schedule. and where we have the chance to try and experiment with it, maybe for 2-3 months. And until then, we hopefully have the final version available. Okay. Yeah, that's basically what I wanted to show you here in today's live stream. So we had a quick look at the Persistence Hub and all the things you get with it. Let me quickly summarize that. You get access to the course library with currently 5 courses, more in the future. That includes the new and updated version of the Hibernate Performance Tuning course. That one will be not available as a standalone course. All other of my courses are also no longer available as standalone courses. So yeah, you get access to the course library there. We do live Q&A calls twice per month as it is planned right now. And you can submit your questions in advance if you want. You can watch recordings of it. So if you're not available when the call is happening live, then you can join later. We get access to a community of like-minded developers. We will do live expert sessions, which are about 1 hour long presentations on different topics, and coding challenges to try the things we discussed in the forum that we showed you on the on an expert session, or that's part of one of the video courses, so that you can try if you really understood what you learned there, and if you are capable of picking the right approach for the described problem. Well, if not, then nothing happened, because you will get a solution to it and you learned something. And that is, I think, one of the great things about these smaller challenges, because they really help you grow and get a better understanding of the technologies you're using. So there were 2 more questions in the chat. Let me quickly answer them. So Bosco asked, do you recommend Blaze persistence? I would say I'm not comfortable recommending it because I don't have any real experience with it. It looks good from all I've seen so far. It looks like an interesting project, but I haven't used it in more than a very small prototype, and that's why I would say if you want to give it a try, go for it, but test if it works how you expect it to work. Test if it solves the problems you're trying to solve, and make your own decision. For me personally, it's too early because I don't have used it in a bigger project or anything. Oh yeah, and I already answered the question about Hibernate 6 and Spring Boot JPA. As I said, maybe in the next major version. Right now, it's not supported by Spring Data JPA, and that's totally fine because there's not even a final release of Hibernate. Okay. Any more questions? If you have any more questions, now is a great time to post them in the chat. If not, then I want to thank you for your attention, being part of this call here, and I hope to see you within the Persistence Hub. As I said, I think it's a great approach to improve your skills as a backend developer, especially with the focus on Java persistence topics. It will extend all the things that you probably already know from typical online courses, with live events, with the community forum, and with a much more interactive approach than you usually see in such things. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I will double check that I didn't miss anything. This looks like I answered everything that I can see in the chat. And then, yeah. Thanks for being part of today's live stream. Oh, there is a question. I asked if you can buy the annual subscription via 2 to 3 payments. No, just one payment. You can choose between monthly payments or annual payments. And as you can see, there's a huge discount right now. And if you join for the annual subscription, then you get an extra discount on that. You basically get 2 months for free per year. And well, if you have a team of developers, I have a few team packages here. Feel free to use them or to use the chat bubble in the lower right corner to reach out to me if you have any questions there. So there's another question in the chat from Bosco. I saw your new video about the repositories, and I have one question that I found strange in the repositories SQL generation. I saw that repositories are making different SQL if I want to search by phone reference object or phone reference ID. In the case of phone reference ID, SQL contains join. In the case of searching by reference object, I see the join is not used, only simple where. Do you know why repositories are making that different? To be honest, no. So that sounds like you see a situation where you have an explicit join and a cross join in your query. And the cross joins sometimes happen. Yeah, Hibernate sometimes creates cross joins if you use the path operator to navigate the association. So if we have authors and books and a mapped association between them, then you could do an authors join books, and then you would define an explicit join. But if you do, let's say the alias for the author's entity is A, then if you do an a.books to navigate the books association on the author entity, then it can happen that Hibernate generates a cross join for it. And you should try to avoid that. Always try to use explicitly defined joins, because they are easier to handle by your database. If you do a cross join, then you basically hope that the query optimizer in your database recognizes that you want to do a join here and replaces it with a proper join, which can be handled more efficiently by the database itself. And that is always a risky approach, because, well, sometimes the query optimizer will not catch that thing and use the inefficient approach. Or maybe you deploy the whole thing to a different database, and there the query optimizer is basically not capable of doing that. So always try to explicitly define the join if possible. Yeah, bye, II. See you on Monday, hopefully. Thanks for being here. Then I have another question from Sagar. In Spring Boot, open session in view is enabled as default if we are using Spring Boot only for REST APIs. I don't find any reason to keep it enabled. What should we do about this? Deactivate it. I totally agree with you. There shouldn't be any reason to keep it open, even if you are using a proper web UI and not a REST API. Open session in view is an anti-pattern. And I don't like it, to be honest, that it's activated by default in Spring Boot. I get it. It makes entities and associations easier to use. But by using open session in view, the view gets, the session gets opened in the view layer, as the name explains. And that means that this enables you to access lazily fetched, uninitialized lazily fetched associations in your view layer. And that is outside the current transactional context. And that means that if your view layer triggers an initialization of that association, then it happens in a separate transaction, which increases the load on the database and which doesn't run within the same transactional context as your business logic. And that means it can see different information than your business logic did just a few milliseconds before. And that can cause a situation in which the presentation in the view layer looks like it's working on inconsistent data. It doesn't. Just executed two queries that ran in two different transactions, but it at least looks strange and can cause some quite heated discussions about what the application is actually doing and showing there. So better avoid it. Provides a better performance. It removes a few risks, and is in general something that's better avoided. Hey, Tepco. Yeah. Any other question? Okay, then I will end this stream here. Again, thanks everyone for attending. If you like this and want to do more live events, and if you want to get more insights on Java persistence related topics, make sure to join the Persistence Hub. For the next 2 weeks, you can join it at the best price. This is a lifetime discount, so you're locking in this price, which is significantly lower than the old price, about a 25% discount on the monthly and annual subscription right now. And I think you shouldn't miss out on that if you want to become a part of the Persistence Hub. Again, it's available for the next 2 weeks, so it ends on, I think it's December 10th, Friday in 2 weeks. Yes, it's December 10th. And after that, the price will increase to $39. But if you sign up now, then you will keep the $29 per month or the $290 per year as long as you keep your membership active. Okay, two more questions. Sagar wrote, regarding query plan max cache size, how should we detect in Hibernate? What should be the right size? Let me quickly check. I wrote an article about that, and I'm pretty sure that I also showed how to access how to monitor that thing. There it is. So you can set it in your configuration using these two properties. By the way, this is the link to the article. And if you activate Hibernate statistics by setting the generate statistics property to true, you can ask your session factory statistics how many hits and misses you had on your cache. So my recommended approach there would be to monitor that for a typical test system. Maybe set up a REST API for that you only use during development and tests, and then run maybe a performance test or a full system test on your application, and then check these cache hit count and cache miss count after that. And then you will see if that actually worked as expected, or if you're running out of query plans. In most cases, you don't. But especially for huge applications, you should have an eye on this. So by default, it's set to 2048 query plans. So each query gets its own query plan, and that one gets cached. So using this, you could use 2048 different query statements in your application, which is good enough for most applications. But yeah, if you need a bigger cache size, then you can increase it here. And then Bosco asked, are there any plans to add support for index in Criteria API? I'm not sure I understand that question correctly, Bosco. I think, but as far as I understand it, the index would be a database index. So that's a database internal optimization. That doesn't get explicitly referenced or used in a query. So what you're doing in a query is you are defining a where clause that checks certain database columns. And the query optimizer of the database then gets the query statement, checks the statistics of the involved tables and the indexes available and all these kind of things, and then decides, okay, is there an index that it could use for that SQL statement or not? So that part is totally independent of the Criteria API. You would need to make sure that there's an index available, and I recommend you do that using your database create and update scripts, which shouldn't be created by Hibernate. Can see on the blog there are articles about Flyway and Liquibase, which are the better options for that. And I have a short course in the Persistence Hub about this database migration with Flyway, where I give you an introduction to all of that. And they provide the much more powerful way to instantiate and migrate your database alongside your application's code. And in addition to that, you might also want to monitor production systems and see what kinds of queries are executed there, which are slow, which indexes are used, etc. And yeah. So, okay, Bosco followed up with optimizer made mistakes in choosing the right index, so we would like to tell explicitly what index to use. You can't do that with the Criteria API. If your database supports this information as part of the SQL statement, you could use a native SQL statement. But I would recommend to analyze that problem together with the DBA and figure out why does the query optimizer think that it should use a different index. Because in most cases, when we developers think that the database used the wrong one, then we are mostly wrong. The databases and the query optimizers have been optimized on a ton of projects by a group of developers who really know what they are doing. So it's pretty likely that the query optimizer did the right thing based on the information it has. So if it's picking the wrong index, then it's quite often because some of the information provided to the optimizers are either completely wrong, or there's another good reason why the index isn't applicable for that query. So yeah, please analyze that with the DBA and try to figure out what's going on there. So Sagar also wrote, first of all, Sagar, it's totally fine. I'm happy to answer all your questions. Just keep asking. That's totally fine. No worries about that. And he asks, are you aware of about any lib which exposes Hibernate performance-related stuff metrics over API, like Spring Boot? Yes, I am. There's something that's part of Hibernate, and that is the statistics API. You need to activate it in your configuration by setting hibernate.generateStatistics to true. And then you can ask your session factory for the statistics and get a lot of information about what's going on internally. And this is part of one of the lectures in the performance tuning course. So if you scroll down here, you know, here you set Hibernate statistics to true. And if you do that, then you get output like this one here, where you see how many statements were executed, how long did that took to prepare and execute, did we have any interaction with the second level cache, how long did it take to flush the persistence context, how many JDBC connections did we use, and so on. And that is usually the entry point for all further analysis. And that is something that I show you at the beginning of the Hibernate performance tuning course. So how to activate this and a few other things to get a better understanding of what Hibernate is doing, because this gives you the necessary insights during development to find inefficiencies and performance problems, even on a small test database. Okay, Saga now wrote, I mean metrics API over REST to get this information. I mean not as Java API. So I've seen in the Hibernate code that there is a metrics integration, but I've never used it and I've no clue if it works and how it works and what you need to do for that. Maybe that helps. Otherwise, I'm not aware of it. And one reason for that is that collecting all these metrics slows down your application. It's usually deactivated in production. But yeah, you could take a look at the metrics component that I saw in the Hibernate repository on GitHub. There's probably some documentation for it. And I'm not sure if you need to use a certain stack to be able to use it or not. As I said, I haven't used it yet, but that is something you might want to look into. Olivier asked, in one of your videos, you talk about to not include relationships in interface-based projections. So what do you do if you still want to include relationship as part of the projection? Okay, that is a Spring Data JPA specific thing. So with Spring Data JPA, you can define an interface and use that as your query projection. And Spring then selects the required information. No, first generates a class that implements the interface and then selects the required information to use that interface as a projection. The problem with associations in that interface projection is that it then fetches entity objects instead of only the information required by the interface projection, and that it might cause n+1 select issues. So what could you do there? Well, one option is if you decide that you actually really need this information, you do a query with the join fetch clause that selects the entity objects from the database with initialized associations and use the interface projection on top of that within your query. And then you still have the issue that Spring Data JPA fetches entities and you lose the performance benefit of DTO projections, but you at least avoid the n+1 select issue. The other option you have is you can use multiple queries depending on how many objects you are selecting. So let's say you know that you are selecting 5 objects and want to initialize an association for each of these 5. Then you could use a query that selects the 5 objects and then loop over them and create another query that fetches the association programmatically as a DTO projection. That can be beneficial if your queries, so all 6 of them, select a small subset of the information mapped by the underlying entity classes. In these cases, this approach can be better. Another approach you could use is you could use a result transformer as part of Hibernate. And that is something that I explained for plain Hibernate recently. Here should be this one. So what you could do is you could create a query that selects the information you need. So in this case, I select the ID and the name of a chess tournament, and then the ID and a round of a game. And well, there are a bunch of games for each tournament. So what we have here is a one-to-many association between tournament and games. So based on this query, we get a lot of records from the database, all with the same ID and name, but with a different game ID and game round. And what I do then is I implement a result transformer. That's a Hibernate 5 based implementation. I use the Stream API to iterate through the result set, map the tournament data to DTO objects programmatically, put them into a map. So where is it? Up here. Put them into a map, get the chess tournament DTO from that map, and then map a game DTO object using the ID and the round, and add that to the list of games. So in that case, you need to you probably need to try and measure a few things to figure out which approach is the best. If you don't have any performance issues in your application, and if you know that you're working on a rather small database and with not too many users in parallel, it might be okay to just use an interface-based DTO projection with Spring Data JPA that maps an association. If the application is performance critical, so if you have a lot of data, if you have a lot of parallel users and everything, then the approach that you can see here with the result transformer is the more complex one to implement, but most likely the one that provides the better performance. And that is for multiple reasons. First of all, entity objects have a management overhead. With Hibernate 5, based on a few tests that I did on my systems, that seemed to be about 20%, that an entity object is slower than a DTO object that maps exactly the same data. But that is something that almost never happens in real life. In a real project, you have a DTO object that only maps a subset of the data mapped by the entity. And due to that, the DTO is even faster than it is compared, measured in this other example. So I see that in a lot of projects that I join as a coach and consultant, where we rewrite queries that no longer fetch entities with several joint fetch clauses from the database, but instead create a DTO projection that matches the use case and only select a very small subset of the data we selected before. And by doing that, we are 4, 5, 6 times faster than we were before. And if that is the case here, so if you can create a query that selects only a small subset of the data that would be selected by your entity classes, then the result transformer provides the much better performance than the interface-based DTO projection with a managed association. But yeah, I hope that got clear. The mapping that I use here with the transform tuple and with the DTO objects is, from a coding point of view, more complex, but less complex at runtime, and can provide the much better performance there. If you're not worried about performance, there's probably no need to introduce something like this. Then you just stick to Spring Data's standard features, and you're good. I hope that answers the question. Oh, nice. I see you are joining the membership while we are talking here. That's awesome. Thanks a lot for that. And yeah. Okay, if you're already using joins, make sure you're using join fetch clauses, Olivier, because the join fetch tells Hibernate to initialize the association. So instead of doing a join GHS tournament T, you would do a join fetch GHS tournament T. Can do that if you're selecting entity objects, which you're doing if you are using the interface-based DTO projections from Spring Data JPA in that specific case. And then Hibernate automatically selects the entity and initializes the association in one query. And if you do that with too many associations, then this creates a much better performance. You're using join fetch clauses. Awesome. Yeah, then that might be good enough depending on the amount of data parallel load on the system and a few other things. But yeah, if you don't want to do result transformers, then what you're doing right now is your best approach. If you want to get a better performance, then you probably need to implement the result transformers. So yeah, as you said, give it a try, experiment with it, see how complex this mapping gets. Let me quickly post so here's the link to the article. Yeah. And if you decide to become a part of the Persistence Hub, then feel free to ask more questions about it on the Q&A call on the next one. So that would be either on the 6th of December or on the 20th. If you want, you can also submit some code before that, and we take a look at it during the call. Just keep in mind it's a group call. There are people from other companies and so on. So make sure that you're allowed to share the code. But then we can take a look at that and talk about that in more detail as well. Then we have Frank with a question. Is it possible to use entity graphs for lazy fetching a recursive structure? We have an entity offer in which we have products, which in turn reference other products. Well, yes and no. So what you're doing with an entity graph is you're telling Hibernate which attributes of a fetched entity you want to initialize. So you can use that to fetch an association, let's say from offer to products. You can then define a subgraph for this product association, and in that subgraph define that you want to fetch the parent object as well. That works. The problem is you can't define it in a recursive way. So you would need to define how many levels you want to fetch by defining a subgraph for each level, which probably is a good thing, because if you can have a huge data structure there or a very deep graph at that point, fetching all of that would probably be a bad idea from a performance point of view. But yeah, in general, you can do that. Well, you can't really define a recursive fetch with an entity graph, but what you can do is you can fetch multiple levels deep by defining an additional fetch graph. And in my experience, that quite often is good enough for most use cases, because you just say, okay, I need to fetch the product and the parent product, or the two next levels or something like that. And not all 20 levels deep if it's a huge hierarchy. Okay, any more questions? Olivier, it's my pleasure. Happy to help. As I said, if you decide to become a part of the Persistence Hub, feel free to submit further questions there to the Q&A calls. If not, then I'm not exactly sure when I will do the next Q&A stream on YouTube. That's not members only, but if you see an announcement for that, of course, also feel free to either join it or submit your question in advance, and then we can talk about that in more detail. Frank just posted a follow-up. We have two scenarios: one, only the offer; two, offer and all products. Yeah, all products is a problem with entity graphs, but with all other approaches as well, because as far as I know, you can't define a recursive join with SQL. As far as I know, you always need to define the next join. That is where graph databases are great. But with SQL, you need to define a join for each level, and by doing that, you can't really do a recursive join. What you could do is, if you have a maximum number of maximum depth of this product hierarchy, then you could fetch that. I mean, if you have a maximum depth of 10 and the product that is part of the offer is just two hierarchy levels that you could join, then the whole thing ends after 10 levels, and otherwise after 2, and otherwise you fetch the whole 10 levels deep. But again, do some performance tests. If you find a way to make that work, then do some performance tests. These join fetches and entity graphs are not intended to be used on huge graphs of entities, because the amount of data that you create in the for that query on the database gets huge. You're creating products there, so we are multiplying the number of records with each join. And we are adding all columns mapped by that entity to the select clause, and that creates a huge result set pretty fast, and might just replace one performance issue with another one. Yeah. Oh, another thing you could do, Frank, is what you could do is you try to figure out what an average an average depth in this product hierarchy is, and you just decide to fetch that part eagerly. And if someone gets a very deep product hierarchy, then you initialize the other associations lazily when your business logic accesses them. That might be another option. Then you have a query that handles most of the cases really well, and there will be a few corner cases where this is an issue. Yeah, Yuk, however you pronounce your name. Yeah, happy to help. Great that my videos and articles helped you in the past. Yeah, happy to help. Feel free to submit questions when there's something. And in the Persistence Hub membership, I will answer them on the Q&A calls. You can also submit questions on the blog or on YouTube videos in the comments. When I receive, I have time available, I try to answer them there or create videos or blog posts about that. Okay, any more questions? If not, then I would say we end it here. I've been going for about 90 minutes now. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining and participating. It was great to see that many questions in the chat. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I was able to answer all the questions from everyone in the required depth. Frank, I'm sorry that I can't provide a better solution for that, but there we are running into a few limits set by SQL and Hibernate, but mostly SQL in this case, I would say. So yeah, there's nothing better you can do there. Okay. Then final words. If you like this, then make sure to join the Persistence Hub. Right now, which means until December 10th, you can join for 29 instead of 39 euros per month and get access to all the courses in the library, live Q&A calls, expert sessions, and so on. Or you subscribe for the annual plan, and then you even get 2 more months for free. Okay. Thanks for joining. Take care, and see you soon. Bye.